If you sign up for this course, I know you want to learn about business topics. Believe me, we're going to do that soon. But before we do that, I want to make sure you get the maximum benefit and effectiveness from this course. And to do that, we need to first look at one very important part of language learning: vocabulary. We sometimes say that vocabulary is the key to all language learning because it's true. You can know all the grammar rules, but if you don't know any words, you can't say anything. On the other hand, if you know all the words, you are able to communicate even without knowing all the grammar rules. True, it might be difficult for others to understand you, but you could still communicate. In any case, a lot of the problems of comprehension come from a lack of vocabulary, of not knowing the right words to say. Obviously, this means it's essential to add to or expand our vocabulary as much as possible. Unfortunately, this process can be frustrating. Not only does it take time and effort, but even after we learn a word, we often forget it. So for all these reasons, it's very important to know the most effective way to learn vocabulary. Don't worry, by the way. I told you before signing up for this course that we wouldn't waste time with useless grammar exercises and boring traditional methods of learning. You can absolutely improve in English fast if you only look at the video content and don't make any real effort at noting down all the words you had to look up. In fact, it's important that we try to understand things without stopping to look up every word that we don't know. In this way, we can infer or guess the meaning of the word through context. Also, if you continue to watch and read a lot of content, you will discover for yourself which words you keep on seeing, which words are the most frequent. And so, after coming across the same word a third or fourth time, maybe it's time to translate it. That method is great, and it will definitely help you advance. But for those of you who want to progress even faster, I want to share the most effective way to expand your vocabulary, as well as the science behind it. So, without further ado, let's take a look at an interesting chart, what we call the curve of forgetting. That's right, the dreaded curve of forgetting. This chart shows how quickly we forget information over time if we don't try to remember it. Spoiler alert, we forget things quite fast. Obviously, the chart is an aggregate or average of typical results. Every person is, of course, different. But to summarize the findings, at day 1, you remember almost everything of the initial learning. Yet, already at day 2, you will forget up to 50% of what you learned if you don't review. By day 7, this number goes up to 75%. And so by day 30, without any review, you might only remember about 20% of the original information. Depressing, isn't it? Obviously, this is not good news for those of us who want to expand our vocabulary. Well, if we look at the second graph, you can see that you need to review a word at a certain interval or space in time if you don't want to forget it. Fortunately, this interval or need to review what is learned becomes longer and longer. That way, you don't have to revise all the words you've learned every single day. Otherwise, it would be impossible. By the way, in this program, there are words and expressions that I repeat in several lessons to help you memorize them. If you read or listen to things in English, you'll also see certain words several times. The more you see these words, the more likely you are to remember them. That's why I always advise spending as much time as possible with the language. It's a good way of increasing frequency and repetition. If you look at the links I provide, it will also take you to articles that will talk about the same thing that we talk about in the lessons, which also strengthens your memory. But as I alluded to or said earlier, there's an even more effective method. And it's based on this idea in the second diagram The idea that we can have longer pauses between reviewing a word without forgetting it. And this method is called Spaced Repetition System, or SRS for short. So yes, this is based on the idea of flashcards, which a lot of people find boring. But SRS is different in that it is more scientific. SRS flashcards or applications use the theory of the forgetting curve. In other words, they present you with flashcards at an optimal frequency so that you memorize the words more effectively and more efficiently. The best SRS app I've found is called Anki, and I provide a short demo or demonstration in the lesson link, so be sure to check that out. This demo also includes my recommendation of a great translator that will speed things up for your workflow, so you won't want to miss that video. For now, I'm going to leave you with 3 practical tips for memorizing vocabulary more effectively. Ready? The first tip is to repeat the English word out loud. There are several studies that show that you memorize something better when you say it out loud. So give it a try. A second and really important tip to effectively memorize new words is to write sentences or groups of words instead of single words. Context is key. In the best case, write your own sentences that use the vocabulary word or words you want to learn. But if you're like me and pressed for time, you can simply copy and paste the entire sentence where you see or encounter the word. That way, you'll have concrete examples and know how to use the words and in what context. This, by the way, is called the lexical approach. It also mirrors the way we learn our first language. We learn groups of words, which we then use to make longer sentences. And if you learn word groups, you'll be able to create sentences more easily too. The third tip is to use images rather than translations whenever possible, because for whatever reason, our brains retain images better than words, so it can be more effective. It's pretty easy to do with flashcards. You can just copy your word into the flashcard you want to learn. But I know that not everyone likes flashcards. I learned German with using hardly any flashcards at all, so it's not necessary. If you try it and you don't like it, don't force yourself. However, with French, I'm progressing much quicker than I did with German, and I learned German while living in Germany. This is because I now know how effective SRS methods can be. And the most important thing is to have all your vocabulary in one place and to revise it regularly. It has to become a habit. By the way, an application like Anki makes this incredibly easy, which I will also demonstrate on the short video linked to this lesson. Find a time during the day when you can review your vocabulary and do it every day. If you build up this habit, I promise you that the rest of the learning process will become much easier. It's okay also if you don't build up this habit right away. If you enjoy watching these videos, that's enough at first. Just make sure you build up a daily habit. And the best way to build up a daily habit is by doing the things we enjoy. I can't stress this enough. If you force yourself to do things that you find miserable, you will quickly lose motivation. Therefore, the most effective time spent studying is doing the things that you like. Trust me, if you develop a regular habit, you'll find your own ways to study and will be motivated as you progress in your own way. It really does become something natural and fun. That's truly the wonderful thing about learning a language. It can be incredibly enjoyable and incredibly fulfilling. There's no reason to ruin the process by doing things we hate. However, as you shall see, the Anki SRS application can be a great tool. You know, in case you're one of those students who really likes to go above and beyond. That's it for now. See you soon in the demo video for an introduction to the Anki SRS application, as well as a great translation tool.